Good evening, everybody. I begin with a quote. Design was not just about what a product looked like on the surface. It had to reflect the product's essence. As a result, the process of designing a product was related to how it would be engineered and manufactured. Product design required total collaboration between designers, the product developers, and engineers, and the manufacturing team. This quote is taken from an article written by Walter Isaacson about Steve Jobs in 2012. Isaacson and many others have written about the marketing genius of Steve Jobs, his unique model of combining engineering and design, and the attention to aesthetics in the success of the product. Steve Jobs was a genius, but as many people in this room know and participated in, and as this exhibition and book reveal, the Apple Revolution had an antecedent, the Olivetti Idiom. And that idiom was developed and taught here on this estate. For our students, it should be of interest to see this chapter in the history of Villa La Pietra, we now call the campus of New York University. The pictures in the exhibition show young men, and it must be observed that they are all men, a reflection of the time, in suits and ties, just like our students. Relaxing in conversation in the gardens, walking across what our students affectionately call the Valley of Death, without apparently breaking a sweat. Each of the villas that are now a part of the life of our students housed the school which Professor Toschi has researched. It is always a great pleasure to be able to support the work of young scholars, though I must comment that Professor Toschi required very little from me. It has been an honor to work with her, an inspiration to observe her discipline and dedication, and a joy to watch her earn the much-deserved success. With that, I turn the proceedings over to Professor Caterina Toschi.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Let's introduce and open this afternoon focused on what we have defined, the Olivetti Idiom, with some acknowledgements. Many people and institutions helped me in the realization of this project, and I was first to reduce their valuable help to a simple list that you are going to find and to meet at the beginning of the exhibition path. But I would like to profit of this opening to thank some people. I see, for example, in the audience Silvia Alessandri, the daughter of Guido Alessandri, the first director of the CISV, Center for Teaching Specializations of Olivetti Sales, the first school of marketing housed in the same villas that are today the site of NYU Florence campus. Thank you, Silvia. I want to thank Associazione Archivio Storico Olivetti and Fondazione Adriano Olivetti and Gabinetto Vieussieux in Florence. My special thanks goes to the staff of NYU Florence, in particular to Elisabetta Clementi. She has really helped me in the organization of this project. To Cristina Fantaggi, who realized the website related to this project, to Lucia Ferroni and Stefania Bacci, who welcomed this project in this wonderful frame of Villa Sassetti, and to Maria Milehaj-Ilovic, who has really helped me in the managing of press and communication. Thank you also to two professors of NYU Florence, Alessandra Capodacqua, she was really interested in my project from the beginning, and Bruce Edelstein for his helpful and valuable suggestions and advices, and for having patiently edited the English text of this book, the Olivetti Idiom, 1952-1979. And about this editorial project, I really want to thank the publishing house, Quodlibet, who has published this text both in English and Italian editions. I would like to thank the director of this publishing house, Stefano Verdicchio, and Shiro Nishimoto, the graphic designer with whom I've worked very well during this month to realize this editorial project. I'm really grateful to Cosimo Vardaro, who designed and who realized piece by piece, handmade, all the exhibition's installation. And finally, my profound thank is to Ellyn Toscano, NYU Florence director and the producer of this project for New York University Florence. I'm really grateful to Ellyn, of course, for being the producer of this project, but above all, for having understood the meaning, the sense, the nature of this project, both the exhibition, the book, and this roundtable. She has understood as director of a university, because we do not have to forget that we are in a university, this is our container, the educational potential of this project for students. And that's the reason for which I've asked our speakers here today in this roundtable to use this 1.5 hours together today to explain to our students from their personal experiences, from their personal stories, from their personal studies, the meaning of this strange expression, the Olivetti Idiom, without reducing it to a simple or simplistic stylistic uniformity, but explaining to students the philosophy, the ethics behind this expression. Because this project has been made for the students, for them. And that's the reason for which I'm an art historian, and I look at the history, and I think that in Italy we have to do not forget this aspect. I look at the history, at the memory, as a patrimony to improve the present, in this case, of our students. Ellyn has perfectly understood this aspect. To deepen and to analyze a fundamental chapter of Italian industrial culture, this particular section of the Olivetti history. And I'm really happy that she has decided to invite today students both in humanities and economics, because this is exactly the sense of this project. The project whose title recalls the first case study analyzed and examined in my project, which was the 1952 exhibition held at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, entitled Olivetti Design in Industry. On that occasion was published a bulletin, a sort of catalog, in which we find this expression, Olivetti Idiom, which is an expression that perfectly summarizes a wide-ranging vocabulary that would be developed over the next 3 decades to describe the company identities. What was the nature of this company identity? Its nature was founded on the fundamental role of culture. To understand this aspect, we have to come back to a text published both in 1945 and 1946 by the major figure of this company, Adriano Olivetti. The title is L'ordine politico delle comunità, a sort of manifesto of Italian constitutional reform, in which Olivetti attributed the crisis of the contemporary society, I quote, to the tragic dissociation between culture and politics, between culture and technology, in thus interpreting the culture in its authentic meaning of the pursuit of values like truth and beauty, like ethics and beauty, so as an instrument to reform the society. This was the basis of what has been defined as industrial humanism in all the critical literature created around the story of this company. This was the basis of Adriano Olivetti's cultural policy, perfectly described by the art historian Giulio Carlo Argan upon the death of Adriano Olivetti, in a famous article published in the magazine Comunità, in which he explained how the cultural policy of Adriano was based on a profound aversion to all forms of patronage. The business, the industry, should not be patron of art, but employer of art. In that sense, Adriano Olivetti decided to invest, to promote culture and art, but inserting it organically, and that is the difference, into the cycle of production, giving to intellectuals and to men of culture a keen awareness of the political rationale behind their work. He was a methodology, described Giulio Carnargan. He invented a methodology applied to his company to recruit intellectuals with whom technicians could and can relate to achieve solutions to problems that apparently, or at least on the surface, had nothing or little to do with the sphere of art and culture. This aspect is strongly linked with an article published on the occasion of the New York exhibition in 1952, Olivetti Design in Industry. Article published by the journalist Ellyn Toscano in the New York Times in October 1952, which is a sort of historical survey of the relationship between business and artistic culture in the US. In this article, Ellyn Toscano described a profound transformation that happened in the 1940s, during which, for the first time, the industry, the business, become aware of the value of a culture as patron of art, of course encouraged by tax provisions and the prestige publicity. Following an idea of patronage still tied to a self-referential conception of art. The turning point happened with Olivetti, which was an important model for the industrial scenario of that time, after the Second World War, thanks to which he invented a new design culture applied to its production, creating a sort of symbolism based on a stylistic idiom based on what has been defined in the American press of the time as integrated design. This expression, integrated design, is another expression of the Olivetti vocabulary, really important, and that was perfectly described by Leo Lionni, who was the curator of the 1952 New York exhibition, in an article published in Art News, in which he invited to go beyond the simplistic and modernist-oriented idea of an integrated design as a mere stylistic uniformity or as a standardization of style. He explained how this term, this expression, who was the basis of Olivetti excellence, was the result of, I quote, the collective awareness of an entire group of people regarding the value of design applied to the production, applied to business, for the growth of the group itself. And so we introduce another term, another word fundamental to approach the Olivetti idiom, the role of the group, or the role of the collective identity as was defined by Luciano Gallino, director of the Sociological Research and Organizational Studies Service at that time, who described how this collective identity was linked with the idea of an entire company, which had absorbed the imperative according to which production and aesthetics had to be aspects of the same composition, working with care and attention to every detail, thus not visible, which seems completely unjustified in terms of costs and in terms of efficiency, but which perfectly exactly reflect the nature and uniqueness of the Olivetti idiom. The importance of group, the importance of the group, the importance of the collective identity of the company is strongly linked with the second case studies that I've addressed in my project, so the importance of the school, the importance of a training program to create that collective identity. The second case study is, in fact, the CISV, a school, the first Italian school of marketing. CISV means Center for Teaching Specialization of Olivetti Sales. The first Italian school of marketing housed in the villas Adriano Olivetti rent to the Acton family, Villa Sassetti, Villa Olivi, Villa Colletta, and Villa Natalia, and now the site of New York University Florence campus. This school represented one of the rare successful examples of industrial pedagogy with a technical humanistic bent aimed at educating the new hires not just about a sort of sales style, but about the company values to create that group, to create that collective identity. To educate those new hires to what has been defined by Ugo Galassi, le esprit du corps, a sort of enterprising mentality, a style of learning, a style of behavior, based on a strong sense of appropriation of the company's value and of the company's goals, whose aim was to teach students how to convey the company image. Its birth had due to a choice, personal choice of Adriano Olivetti at the beginning of the 1950s in a serious moment for the company, in a serious overproduction crisis due to the production of 4 new typewriters and 3 new calculators, in a moment of accumulation of stock of unsold machines, in front of which Adriano Olivetti decided, instead of firing 500 workers, he decided to hire 700 vendors, 700 salesmen, understanding the need for the company of a training program to revolutionize the sales, the entire sales system, teaching to these 700 new salesmen how to tell the story of the Olivetti. So it was a problem of storytelling at that time. How to tell the story of the Olivetti to sell its products, so to improve the sales. It happened in a particular moment in which the role and the function of the salesperson was absolutely undervalued and underqualified. In making this choice, Adriano Olivetti understood the need to lend new professional dignity to the sales dimension, creating a school thanks also to an important figure, that one of Guido Alessandri, who was the first director of the school, who created a real training program also for people with and students with university degrees in letters and law, training them to develop their administrative capacities, in thus developing and creating a real industrial pedagogical utopia model founded on a unique fusion of humanism and technology. The importance of sales is strongly linked with the third case study addressed by my project, which is the reality of the store. So the settings for the display and sale of Olivetti products, stores realized by the major signatories in the avant-garde architecture, and stores photographed and documented by photographs as Eric Hartmann, Wayne Miller, Ugo Mulas, and Paolo Monti. I would like to refer just to a single case study, which was the store in New York, the Olivetti store in New York, designed in 1954 by this BBPR studio, which had a particular characteristic that on the sidewalk in front of the store window, it was installed on a pedestal, a model of typewriter, the famous Lettera 22. And this Lettera 22 was left to passers-by who left every hour hundred of messages. This was really interesting and is exactly linked with this idea of collective identity, because this store was part of the collective life of the city and perfectly reflected that aspect of this strange company. I want to recollect a text also by Thomas Watson Jr., who was the president of IBM, a text published in 1975 entitled "Good Design is Good Business," in which he recollects an episode of his life when, in the beginning of the 1950s, he passed around the Fifth Avenue. The Olivetti store in New York was on the Fifth Avenue. He passed and he was walking when he was attracted by the environment of this strange store, so colorful. It was realized with pink marble for the staircase and the desktop, with green marble from the Runat's quarry in Val d'Aosta for the floor, and there was a strange moving wheel, blue and yellow, with all the models of typewriters and calculators. He was strongly attracted by this strange environment and the design characteristic of this environment, and for that reason he decided to meet Adriano Olivetti in Italy. And after having received an important letter in 1955 by one of the managers of the IBM in Holland, a letter in which this manager told him how lousy appeared the IBM advertising, promotion, and design materials compared to that one of to the promotion and advertising materials by the Olivetti. After having received this letter, he decided to collect both promotional materials of IBM and promotional materials of Olivetti. And he decided to put them all out on the floor, to look at them, and in that precise moment, he realized that IBM had a design problem, as he defined it. And so he organized a famous meeting with all IBM managers in a hotel of Pacana Mountains, and the IBM started to invest in the design. The fourth and fifth case studies analyzed by my project are two expositions. I've decided to analyze this case study because I would like also to use the history of the exhibition and the language of the exhibition to explain what is the sense of the Olivetti idiom. Two different exhibitions, two traveling exhibitions. The first organized since 1961 to 1966 from Zurich to Nairobi and Hong Kong, whose title is Stile Olivetti. And the second exhibition, entitled Forme et Recherche, was organized since 1969 to 1971 from Paris to Japan and Germany. I would like to explain the role of the exhibition for the Olivetti. I would like to cite the introductory text written in the catalogue of the exhibition Stile Olivetti, Geschichte und Formen einer italienischen Industrie in Zürich al Kunstgewerbemuseum. In this text, the director, Hans Fischli, explained how and why he decided to refuse the first exhibition project proposed by the Olivetti company for this exhibition. It was not because this project was not avant-garde. He explained how new and how experimental this project was for the context of the Kunstgewerbemuseum. The reason was because we were in Switzerland, and in Switzerland there was already an increasing tendency of investing in design applied to buildings, products, and advertising. What he wanted to do, it was so not a matter of representing the aesthetic side of the Olivetti style through an exhibition, but, I quote, to lend visibility to the ethical root of all aesthetics through the image of the Olivetti company. So, to create an exhibition project in which both the design culture, the advertising language, the role of people, the social responsibility of this company towards workers and the local territory were all elements organized and set to express the ethics behind this company. In this catalog, we find a reference to an important philosopher, also cited by Alice Lauchheim in her article in the New York Times of 1952. This philosopher is Friedrich Schiller, for whom the main task of culture is that one of introducing the role of beauty in the human life, using culture and beauty to educate the will, the imagination, the rational thought of people, instilling a certain artistic sensibility. Since what? Since only aesthetics, Schiller explains, can lead to the development of morality. Again, this aspect, this value of ethics and morality in the goals of the industry, in the goals of a company. And this is exactly the sense of the last case studies analyzed, the exhibition Forme et Recherche, which was an experimental project designed by Gaia Aulenti, wonderful, and documented by photos by Ugo Mulas and Giorgio Colombo, which represented a real parabola of what we have tried to address together today. A parabola that ends with the spectacularization of the Olivetti products, but in whose catalog, which is a real piece of art edition exhibited in our exhibition, is present a formula and expression theorized by the poet Giovanni Giudici, in which he defined the sense of the Olivetti idiom in terms of dessin de la vie, design of life, in thus expressing exactly the nature and the sense of what I've tried to explain to you today. The end of this project is, and the end of the chronology of this project is the 1979, which is the year of closure of the CISV, the school housed in our villas, which marks the advent of a new area of a more commercial and professional-oriented type of educational research for the company, with the closure of this avant-garde school, the CISV. But the 1979 was also the year of the opening of another exhibition, Design Process Olivetti 1978, curated by Nathan Shapira at the University of California in Los Angeles, in whose catalog has been published a text by Renzo Zorzi, who at that time was the director of the Cultural Relations, Industrial Design and Advertising Office, and text in which Zorzi described Adriano Olivetti as a forerunner looking back at the 70 years who had passed. But what is interesting is the particular historical moment. 1979, a moment of rapid acceleration of production processes with the continuous electronic advancements, of course, with the consequent risks of products obsolescence, and a moment characterized by graphic specialization based on this new concept of corporate identity. In this particular historical moment, between the lines, Renzo Zorzi alluded to the risk of a possible involution of the situation, going back to the theme, the ancient, the past theme, the past topic of ethics and industrial cultural policy, about which he hinted at the first signs of a misunderstanding. And I want to conclude my introduction with this misunderstanding and with this doubt, looking and reflecting about our present. I quote, "It is so easy to shift from morality to moralizing, from form to formalism, and from identity to identification." Thank you very much.
I'm really grateful to our speakers for being here today with us, and thank you also for the patience of listening to this long introduction, of the introduction of the project. Okay, let's start with Giovanni Maggio. Giovanni Maggio, he worked for the Olivetti from 1960 to 1989, including the direction from the 1970 to 1976 of the CHIP, so the schoolhouse here in the villas of NYU campus. He was the head of advertising for the Olivetti Group, of communication and external relations for Olivetti Idiom. Later, he served as business management consultant, and for 20 years, he was professor of culture and business communication at the University of Florence. So please, Giovanni Marco, thank you very much.
Olivetti has come back. È l'unica frase che dirò in inglese, perché il mio inglese è così arrugginito per non praticarlo più da oltre 30 anni, che mi avvarrò del generoso aiuto della interprete accanto a me, la signora Stevie Jones. Olivetti has come back. Siamo tornati a rioccupare, se non gli spazi e le ville, almeno la mente, i progetti, i programmi della New York University. Questa è la nostra ambizione e speriamo così che abbiano seguito queste bellissime iniziative di cui oggi penso che sia solamente l'inizio. D'altra parte i cimenti culturali della Olivetti sono appena sfiorati. C'è molto da studiare, c'è molto da ricercare, c'è molto da investire, perché così l'eco della nostra esperienza si sviluppi soprattutto nei confronti dei giovani studiosi, a cui penso così di fare riferimento in questo mio brevissimo speech. L'avere inserito in una mostra dedicata principalmente alla identità visiva della Olivetti anche il tema della scuola olivettiana, io credo che porti necessariamente ad una riflessione sul concetto di idioma, tema a cui ha accennato prima anche la dottoressa Toschi. Devo dire così brevemente, le ho anche detto che questo titolo mi è molto piaciuto, di Olivetti Idiom, e l'ho anche un po' invidiato, e mi sarebbe molto piaciuto inventarlo io, quando così presentavo il caso Olivetti alla scuola nei miei corsi di cultura e comunicazione d'impresa, scienze politiche qui a Firenze. Io devo dire così che leggo la parola idioma come carattere distintivo, carattere unico, singolare di un sistema di comunicazione di una comunità. Un linguaggio comune, cioè capace di trasmettere correttamente l'identità, i valori, i segni soprattutto di una particolare cultura. Allora mi pare di poter affermare che in Olivetti l'idioma non è solo il linguaggio particolare dei manufatti e i segni di una dell'identità visiva, ha un significato più alto e anche più ampio. È il significato di una grammatica condivisa in quella che si chiama adesso la narrative organization, che sono valori, che sono principi, che è ideologia. In una parola in latina è un idem sentire. In altri termini è l'espressione dell'intero sistema culturale, quello complessivo, quello che i sociologi dell'organizzazione chiamano adesso cultura d'impresa. Nel 1965 il signor Watson, che era il fondatore, il presidente della IBM, nel ricevere questo prestigioso premio Kaufman, premio per il design, dichiarò pubblicamente: questo è un premio che prendo per conto di altri, per uno che ci ha insegnato ad amare il bello nell'industria. Io lo prendo per conto di Adriano Olivetti. Watson non sapeva, evidentemente, e non sarebbe forse nemmeno riuscito a capire per la differenza culturale tra i due personaggi, che quella definizione, quell'amare il bello nell'industria, era una parte della filosofia, del principio ispiratore, di quella che ho chiamato prima la cultura complessiva della Olivetti. La Olivetti che era la creatura vivente, quella che si chiama l'utopia concreta, dove quei concetti richiamati, quei concetti di armonia, di bellezza, non erano una generica aspirazione, come Watson poteva rappresentare, ma erano i principi ispiratori che generano i prodotti eleganti, le fabbriche a misura di uomo, le immagini e la grafica avanzata e le parole dei poeti a sostegno dell'advertising e dei manufatti visibili. Devo dire che la prima cosa così a cui avevo provato per definire è anche sommariamente raccontare la storia e la figura di Adriano Olivetti, che in parte così è stata veramente così molto ben raccontata e descritta dalla lecture della dottoressa Toschi. E quindi al di là di questa difficoltà, io devo dire così che la figura di Adriano Olivetti resta un gigante del Novecento italiano. È un gigante sulle cui spalle, seguendo l'incitamento di Isaac Newton, conviene salire per guardare più lontano, perché è più facile capire, avere la visione se si sale sulle spalle di questi giganti. E questa è una raccomandazione che io faccio a voi, giovani studenti, perché almeno questo vi possa servire. Cioè riuscire a capire che è un vantaggio capire questi personaggi enormi e nel Novecento non ce ne sono molti in Italia e forse anche nel mondo. Adriano Olivetti è un gigante dalle spalle molto molto forti, saliteci sopra. Adriano Olivetti è stato definito in molte maniere, quella più clamorosa fu definito sovversivo in un rapporto della polizia fascista. Poi ci sono scritti saggi su Adriano profeta inascoltato, l'intellettuale eclettico, l'utopista concreto. In realtà da industriale, prima di tutto, e poi illuminato, aperto e curioso, ha un grande amore per gli Stati Uniti. Questa è una cosa che ci lega molto, tra l'altro, che è un tema su cui si può continuare a lavorare. Gli era stato inviato in viaggio, appena studente universitario o subito dopo la laurea, in un viaggio in seconda classe, nei treni scomodi, a scoprire, a capire, a vedere la realtà industriale americana. Vi era tornato molte volte con una forte attenzione a quello che succedeva nelle fabbriche americane e soprattutto mettendo molta attenzione in quella che si chiamava scientific management, cioè la scienza organizzativa industriale. Studiare Taylor, capire le fabbriche che si ispiravano a Ford. In effetti, ritornando da uno di questi viaggi, soprattutto credo così agli inizi degli anni 50, lui imposterà la sua fabbrica su quei principi capiti negli Stati Uniti. Addolcisce il Fordismo, difatti si parla di un Fordismo dolce, e ottiene un risultato incredibile, un incremento della produttività che Gallino, che è un grande sociologo olivettiano, ha calcolato intorno al 600%. Lo racconta lo stesso Adriano in un discorso agli operai nel Natale del 1954. E sono parole di Adriano. Verso l'estate del 1952 la fabbrica attraversò una crisi di crescenza. Le macchine si accumulavano nei magazzini di Ivrea e nelle filiali in decine di migliaia. C'erano due soluzioni: diventare più piccoli, diminuire gli orari, assumere più nessuno. E qualcuno cominciava a parlare di licenziamenti. L'altra soluzione, che era una soluzione più difficile, era quella di instaurare immediatamente una politica di espansione più dinamica e più audace. Fu scelta senza esitazione la seconda. In Italia furono assunti 700 nuovi venditori. Furono create filiali, la battaglia condotta dal dottor Galassi fu vinta di libero. Queste sono le parole di Adriano Olivetti. E saltando un po' quello che avevo detto, avevo scritto anche così, perché ne ha parlato la dottoressa Toschi, riassumo qui rapidamente che cosa successe. Per l'implementazione di questo progetto nacque a Villa Natalia il Centro Istruzione Specializzazione Vendite, affidato ad un grande gentiluomo olivettiano, l'avvocato Guido Alessandri, che per me e per gli olivettiani nostalgici resta il genius loci di queste ville. Faccio un breve accenno a quello così che è la cultura e il simbolismo organizzativo, cioè i cultural studies hanno spiegato che la cultura d'impresa è dimensione centrale nella vita delle organizzazioni. E rapidamente la definizione qual è? È la cultura come credenze, come miti, come valori condivisi, come principi, come rituali e così via, comportamenti, regole implicite. E persino Barton Clark nel suo saggio Imprese come culture la definisce una saga organizzativa. È proprio una saga organizzativa che è quella così che sente chi entra in Olivetti, chi viene assunto in Olivetti. Allora iniziano i racconti, quella che oggi si chiama racconto della storia. Sono racconti di successi, di primati, di imprese straordinarie, e io accennerò solamente così per rapidità, che mi viene richiesta, ad alcuni capitoli. Il tecnico Natale Capellaro, che non è un ingegnere, che porta via dalla officina pezzi di ricambio e a casa produce la divisumma 24, che è un apparecchio che fa la divisione, la moltiplicazione e le connette tra di loro. Il risultato di questa macchina è che viene prodotta a 35.000 lire di allora e viene venduta a 365.000. Macchina che noi abbiamo modestamente venduta in grande quantità. Un altro tema è il primato elettronico, la storia dell'invenzione dell'Ivrea, che è la prima macchina, il primo mainframe costituito da transistor, non più da valve. La fabbrica di Ivrea, Figini e Pollini, costituita di acciaio e di vetro, perché l'operaio perlomeno, l'operaio che è sottratto da un destino rurale, perlomeno veda il sorgere del sole, il cambio delle stagioni. L'acquisto della Rountable, che è decisa un po' per rivincita di Adriano, ma soprattutto per avventuroso coraggio. L'asilo nido dei grandi architetti, per una politica di welfare per le madri che non è stata ancora raggiunta a oggi. Ne cito l'ultima, la costituzione di una fabbrica a Pozzuoli, che è una zona depressa del meridione, perché l'operaio non debba emigrare al nord, come veniva richiesto da altre grandi industrie italiane, ma questa fabbrica deve essere costruita, e la committenza è molto precisa, bella sul mare, come un grande albergo. Vado a concludere saltando un po' di cose che mi ero ripromesso di raccontare. Vorrei definire una cosa: Adriano è l'eccezione italiana del Novecento. La sua impresa non è solamente un'impresa di capitali, non è nemmeno un'impresa solo di prodotti avanzati, di successi, di buoni numeri di bilanci. La sua missione va oltre l'indice dei profitti e direi che conduce i destini degli uomini, se ne occupa, verso quegli ideali che lui enuncia e che promette, gli ideali della bellezza, del rispetto della persona, dell'armonia dei luoghi del lavoro. Il discorso della inaugurazione di quella fabbrica di cui vi ho accennato, quella bella, quella come un albergo di lusso, non è paternalistico, ma è una profezia che si avvera, una profezia che appunto vado a leggere. Può l'industria, l'avete sentita questa frase, però ai giovani che si avvicinano a studiare Adriano Olivetti, che spero lo facciano, è veramente una frase che va scritta in una lapide. Può un'impresa avere dei fini che non siano solo quelli indicati dall'indice dei profitti? E più avanti, la nostra società crede nei valori spirituali, ricordiamoci questa parola, che è veramente una parola molto molto difficile da pronunciarsi. Noi laici abbiamo molta difficoltà a usare questa parola, i valori spirituali, i valori della scienza, i valori dell'arte, i valori della cultura. Crede, sono sempre parole di Adriano, che gli ideali di giustizia non possano essere estraniati dalle contese ancora ineliminate tra capitale e lavoro, quindi c'è anche un messaggio politico. Crede soprattutto nell'uomo, nella sua fiamma divina, nella sua possibilità di elevazione e di riscatto. We are back and we will stay there. Many thanks for your attention.
Let's introduce our second speaker, Beniamino De Lippoli. Since 2009, he has been a member of the Adriano Olivetti Foundation's Scientific Committee, of which he became Secretary General in 2016. He is a member of the Advisory Committee of the Olivetti Historical Archival Association since 2016 and has been appointed Vice President. Since 2012, he is Editorial Director of the Edizioni di Comunità. So please, thank you very much.
In the first place, I'd like to thank the New York University for having organized this exhibition and for deciding to introduce it with this roundtable meeting. And of course, I would like to thank the director, Ellyn Toscano, and Caterina Toschi for having invited us here today, and also Caterina for her very well articulated and accurate introduction to this project. I'm going to show like few images, and I hope that the poetry of certain citations are not going to have not been lost in translation in the PowerPoint. And as my time is limited, to tackle this very big question, what is the Olivetti idiom? I will provide a brief overview of the Olivetti philosophy, placing a specific focus on the essence of beauty according to Olivetti. And moreover, I will briefly revoke some key points with the help of a few images, as I said, that I hope can provide a frame around Olivetti's legacy, a legacy that, in our opinion, to our foundation's opinion, contains the nexus between material progress, technical efficiency, ethical responsibility, and, of course, beauty. So, let's try to start. What is the Olivetti idiom, and how may we define it in the first place? And secondly, most importantly, what is the meaning in its study and in its revival, as Professor Maggio clarified to us? In other words, should we be looking at the achievements of Olivetti as an antique dealer marvels at beautiful but dusty furniture, or shall we look at the beauty created by Olivetti as well as his teachings as a concrete possibility for a change? In other words, I ask myself whether there is a deeper meaning, I will also say like a social meaning, even in beauty. And because ultimately the question that Adriano Olivetti asked himself is not very different from the question that I guess all of us is asking himself right now, which in Olivetti's word is, how can we be technically advanced without being internally and ethically spoiled? So I would like to begin by reading what actually has been already just read by Professor Maggio, the speech Adriano Olivetti, spoken by Adriano Olivetti during the inauguration of the new implants in southern Italy, in Pozzuoli, in 1955. Hopefully, like, no one is going to compare the translations, because mine is definitely worse. Can industry set aims for itself? Are these simply in the index of profit? Beyond its obvious rhythm, isn't there something more fascinating, a destination, a vocation, even in the life of a factory? We do believe in spiritual values, love, truth, justice, beauty. Whoever forgets even one of these values cannot lead anyone on the path of civilization. And then there is a second keyword I would like to focus on, which is the word comunità. And this drawing was drawn by Adriano Olivetti, and it symbolizes his idea for the community in the area surrounding Turin and surrounding Ivrea, where the main Olivetti implants were headquartered. And it was made in 1958, which is the very same year when Olivetti acquired its American competitor, the Underwood Corporation. And in other words, to us, like during the highest phase of industrial expansion, there was an understanding within the factory, within the company, of the necessity to remain deeply connected and rooted to the original surroundings, maintaining, I would say, like within the company, a global scale, and linked to this notion of like being like highly rooted in the community. There is another photograph I would like to show you portraying the Olivetti family in the early 20s. And Camillo Olivetti, who was the founder, is that man with that fancy and quiet, inspiring white beard. And Adriano Olivetti is right behind him. And shortly after this photo was taken, Camillo leaves the factory in the hands of Adriano with only one imperative. Adriano, you can use whichever means you see fit in the introduction of new methods, but never fire anyone. Involuntary unemployment is the worst disgrace that can befall a human being. And I believe that herein lies like the point we're trying to reach. It lies in the next photograph portraying Adriano Olivetti on the left, where in this photograph we see two men speaking as man to man and not as owner and worker. Can I have the light on again, please? Sorry, because I'm also reading something. And speaking as man to man and not as owner and worker, although they are committed obviously on a very different like roles and position within the company. That picture was taken in the implants in Via Gervis, and Via Gervis were along the factory production lines. This photo was shot in Via Gervis along the factory production lines. And if we look at Via Gervis at bird's eye from above today, we can note that the factory production lines grew proportionally alongside the buildings dedicated to the social services. In other words, as the factory grew on one side of the street, as did social services and activities on the other side. And what follows are just a few examples of that. This is the Olivetti factory in Pozzuoli that was mentioned before by Giovanni Maggio. And then we have the cafeteria in Ivrea, the daycare for children in Ivrea, and then again offices and housing for employees. And with the next picture, I guess, perhaps we have reached now the essence of the question which aim to lead my presentation. So what is beauty and why do we need it? Let's take into consideration this picture and this machine. This is the Elea 9003, designed by Ettore Sozzas, and the first electronic calculator run by Modern Components, launched by Olivetti in 1959. And as we can see, occupied an entire room, and therefore it's evident that it no longer has a place in our contemporary world. However, the words that Adriano Olivetti used and expressed to explain the reasoning behind technological research in Olivetti on the day of its launching in Milan are somehow timeless. This machine was crafted by man to serve man, to free him from the ancestral toil of labor. We must commit to a vaster moral and material front. 6 years later, 1965, the same idea of technology produced the P101, the P101, considered to be the first personal computer in history. And as its inventor stated, Per Giorgio Perotto, he said, I didn't want a machine, I want to create a machine that did not require an expert in a white lab coat to make it function. And it was used, as a matter of fact, 4 years later, in 1965, by NASA for the moon landing, tangibly demonstrating that looking at people's inner needs in projecting is what allows humanity to reach beyond its limits. And perhaps that in Italian, only in this case, sounds better and sounds more or less like that progettare a misura d'uomo è quello che permette all'umanità di raggiungere a mete ritenute fino a quel momento inarrivabili. And I hope that these few images I can show what, according to Olivetti, really means to be avant-garde. In our view, alongside all the avant-garde examples that we could use and bring to define Olivetti, products, architecture, commercial policies, cultural policies, the one which is most hidden at first glance and yet instead most truly represents the Olivetti idiom is the reason behind the 9 months maternity leave with full pay that Adriano Olivetti guaranteed to all female workers, or better, like the words, again, Adriano Olivetti used to clarify that social service. We express our solidarity so that no worker who is also a mother may look with envy and pain at those mothers who have the luck and the right to enjoy the first months of their baby's life at home. In other words, we can say that to Olivetti, the factory is not only a producer of goods, the factory must be a producer of good. And in this precise identity between thought and action, between goods and good, we can trace and give ground to the answer to what is the Olivetti idiom. And before any other implications, the Olivetti idiom is an idea of community where it's still possible to recognize one another as people, first and foremost. The Olivetti idiom is a cult of independence, is the imagination of the future as a free space where to experiment, a free space where all the most modern tools are to create a world that is materially more fascinating, but also spiritually more elevating. Again, in the words of Adriano Olivetti, a place where beauty and tolerance are names and not vacant words. I think that ultimately our commonplace ambitions that give life to authentic values and everlasting accounts of history that are worth to be told. At this regard, it might be helpful to read the inspiring words of the Russian poet Joseph Brodsky, who once wrote that beauty cannot be programmed, as beauty is always the unpredicted result of very normal intentions. And to conclude, Therefore, as I stated in the title of this presentation, Community on the March, these values are timeless, and this is the reason why there is a multitude of people of all ages that today see in Olivetti, especially in Adriano Olivetti, achievement and legacy, an example for an authentic progress and a true civilization. A multitude, a community, again, that is capable to find in Olivetti an answer to timeless questions for mankind, such as how to give eventually birth to a more fair and a more decent society where to grow up our children, where to grow our future. And this is the reason why at the end we can say that somehow the Olivetti idiom is not a formula or a matter that involves a practical answer. The Olivetti idiom is above all ourselves. And for us, for the Adriano Olivetti Foundation, the Olivetti idiom truly comes to life in these words that were used, again, by Adriano Olivetti to describe the bell which, since 1962, represents our institution. No one should hesitate to ring our bell. It rings for a free word, more palpably fascinating and more spiritually elevating. It rings for the best part of ourselves, and it echoes every time justice is up against violence. The weak are up against the mighty. Intelligence is up against power. Bravery is up against defeat. Poverty is up against egotism. Knowledge is up against improvisation. Truth is up against error, and love is up against indifference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Beniamino De Liguori. It's a real honor to introduce our third speaker, Perry King. He moved to Italy in 1964 as a consultant to Olivetti, where he was design coordinator for corporate image. His work included dot matrix fonts as well as books and posters, all designed with Santiago, his partner in founding King Miranda Associati in 1976. He was lecturing professor at Milan Polytechnique, and he was awarded the distinction of Royal Designer for Industry in 2000. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. What I'm going to talk about is some personal experience rather than talking to you about the principle of Adriano Olivetti and Olivetti. So I'm here as Perry King and not as a scholar, and I wanted to talk about how I came to work for Olivetti and how I came to Italy, because it might be interesting for you. I studied at Birmingham in the United Kingdom in a school of art, and the head of the Department of Industrial Design when I left was a man called Naum Slutsky. And Naum Slutsky had taught at the Bauhaus, so I'm as old as that, but he had taught at the Bauhaus. And we learned about the aesthetic of the machine, less is more, and many other wonderful words linked to the economy and the aesthetic of the machine. And I was in the school library, and I looked at a magazine called Stile Industria, and I saw this computer. This isn't a very good photograph, I'm afraid, but it was the Ellyn 9003, which you talked about, and it was the first mainframe computer in Europe. And I found it an amazing piece of work, completely different from what I'd been taught at school. It was based on not the aesthetic of the machine, but the necessity of the person using it. And this was a revelation to me, and I thought I had to come and work in Italy for this man who was Zotzas, who designed it. I knew really very little about Olivetti, but I knew I wanted to come and work for a man who could do this. And when I arrived in Olivetti, it was difficult to get a job with Olivetti, but when I got one, I discovered that there were two design offices, one Mario Bellini and one Ettore Zotzas. And I asked myself why Olivetti had two design offices. The answer I came to was that of their excellence, they were both brilliant. Bellini is a really fantastic designer, and Ettore Zotzas was a revolutionary designer who transformed our idea of design. When I started to work with him, we started to work on the Valentine typewriter. This is, and was then, an extraordinary achievement. It was a vision that Zotzas had that you didn't type a formal letter anymore if you were writing to your girlfriend or as a girl writing to your boyfriend. In fact, his idea was that it wouldn't have used upper and lowercase letters. His idea, which I was very happy to share, you have to remember this was 66 and 67, just before a very revolutionary time. And his idea was that this typewriter should only use maiuscoletto, small uppercase. But in fact, this was impossible because this mechanism that's inside the typewriter is a standard mechanism, and it would have been hideously expensive for Olivetti to change the mechanism to simplify it. So in fact, it writes upper and lower case quite more. But the idea was, if you like, anticipating the SMS before the web and before the computer, to be able to write informal messages very quickly. It marked a turning point in design. After this, I worked with Zotzas for several years, and then I left and did other things, and Renzo Zorzi asked me to work in Olivetti corporate image. And one of the things he wanted me to do was to produce the book design process, Olivetti 1908 to 1978. And this is the cover. This is the design we produced, which Zorzi liked, which is, if you like, the crystal of the design process growing through the years. Each one of the segments is a year, and all the cultural activities linked to architecture, exhibition design, graphic design, interior design, industrial design, and identification systems were all linked together, part of a whole. And this was characteristic of the idea that Zorzi was trying to demonstrate with this booklet, which was extremely interesting. I hope you've got one in the exhibition, but I didn't see it. So this idea of the crystal, the activity as a unified whole, was extremely important. And Zorzi was very kind to us, and he let us design a poster for Olivetti in the world. But one of the other activities I was involved in was I inherited from Hans von Cleer and Clino Castelli the production of the corporate image manuals for Olivetti. These were the tool that Olivetti used to define the use of the logotype and the identification of the company in all its sister companies, daughter companies all over the world. And this was a tool that all these agencies were given and which they had to use. It wasn't an imposition, it was a desire to coordinate their activities. And was an extremely interesting exercise. He also asked Santiago Miranda and I to design some dot matrix fonts. The computer industry, the banking industry, had just begun to use printers which typed not like a typewriter, but with a dot matrix. And this was a very difficult time to standardize these characters. Olivetti was in competition with other manufacturers to establish the European Computer Manufacturer Association's standard. So we presented our designs with these booklets. And it was an example of the attention that Olivetti paid to details. The text in the book, these sheets, which were examples of the fonts used, was a description of Joyce's, of the kidneys that Bloom ate for breakfast in Jane Joyce's book. These are examples. It's a very difficult problem, the dot matrix font, because this is a very rich one, but it's very difficult to make the descending letters and the rising letters because the matrix is very limited. And this is an example of one of the pages in the book. And he also asked us to design a poster for typeface design, because I was also responsible for typeface design office in Ivrea. And we went out to get designs from very important typeface designers like Muller Brockman, for example. And we asked them to design these typefaces for Olivetti typewriters and printing machines. I have to confess it was a total failure. There was a technician, brilliant, who designed all the typefaces for Olivetti. And he always found a reason why these typefaces designed by very capable and brilliant designers couldn't be used. So in fact, the only typefaces we were able to bring through were the ones he wasn't interested in, which was the dot matrix printer. And Zorzi also asked us at the same time to design this poster, which is a grande quadrato magico, which is on each axis and column and line, and each motive in there, the sum of the numbers printed on the little squares adds up to 131,104. And this amused Zorzi very much, and he asked us to design a poster for him. But then he asked us to solve, and this is the last thing I'm going to bore you with, he was very concerned that as the electronics began to invade the machines that Olivetti was making, the interface of the machine wasn't being studied, he thought, correctly. It was considered by the designers of the machine, I have to say Zozza and Bellini, as the graphics of the machine. And Zorzi was convinced that it was much more than that. So we did some research for him, and we found in the museum, in the Egyptian Museum in Turin, this doorway, which was the doorway of a temple in Aswan, I think, I can't remember where. And it was where the priests of the temple kept the material for sacrifices that were donated and used in the temple. And the door was sealed with wads of clay, onto which the priest or the keeper made signs which showed what he was putting in and what he was taking out. And when he re-entered the door, he took off this piece of clay and dropped it beside him. And this was the interface of the warehouse. We thought this was very fascinating. So we started to consider what the machines were. And you have to remember that Olivetti knew everything about a physical keyboard, a typewriter. It knew exactly the pressure, the tactile response, how much it had to move. The ergonomics of a standard typewriter keyboard were absolutely the essence of what Olivetti was doing in designing these machines. But if we look at the second slide, you can see that when you use the keyboard, you put your finger on the key, and you can no longer see what's written on the key. Now, this doesn't matter on a standard QWERTY keyboard, because we all know how to type, don't we? So we all type with all our fingers. Well, some of us do. I still use two. But the idea was that these were machines which weren't your personal typewriter or computer. They were, if you like, corridor machines, printers. It was before the days when the computers were laptops. And so the communication with the machine was very different. You have to remember this was a long time ago. So what we did was to take off the identification of the key and put it on the machine. And then we could then see and feel the key. But in fact, the interesting thing in those years was that the mechanical key was being superseded by a plastic film and a small interaction underneath. So we had another problem, which was how to identify that zone where your finger could touch. So we had to establish a tactile feedback. So there was a problem of the vision of the instructions on the key, the tactile feedback. And then there was the problem of the machine's response, because the machine talked to you. Not only did it do something, it also gave a signal. So there was a problem of how to read this signal. We were trying to communicate with the machine. And the slides below, you can see here, we have the tactile feedback here and the visual impression here. And then we had the feedback from the machine. If you told it to start, a light came on which told you that it had done that. So we had a visual and a tactile feedback, but also very often we had an acoustic feedback too. And this was the work that he asked us to do, studying and these are some of our first drawings. And this is a keyboard that we designed. And this is another example. You can see the target zone, the information zone, the feedback zone. And this, if you like, is an illustration of the dedication Olivetti had to every detail of their machine. And it was a great privilege to work with them. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this fascinating
There were two.
presentation. Okay, let's pass from design to photography, and let's introduce our first speaker, Giorgio Colombo, internationally renowned photographer. In 1963, Giorgio Colombo began documenting contemporary art, starting from the Venice Biennale. In 1969, he worked for the design studio of Ettore Sottsass and was responsible for the publicity campaign for Olivetti's new typewriter, Valentine. In 1970, he started a collaboration with Hans von Trier on Olivetti's corporate image and managed the graphics and installation of the exhibition Curated artisti italiani, più che nature. Ceroli, Punellis, Marotta, Pascal.
The Musée des Arts Décoratifs Louvre in Paris, and of the traveling exhibitions Olivetti, Forme et Recherche. So, please, thank you very much.
Anch'io mi avvalgo della signora che traduce. Allora,
Use the translator.
questa è stata... Giovanni Maggio ha già spiegato molto bene qual è la filosofia, soprattutto la filosofia di Adriano, dell'Olivetti, in particolare di Adriano Olivetti. Io ho sempre considerato tecnologicamente l'Olivetti un'azienda molto avanzata, ma quello che manca agli altri che sono venuti dopo, i vari Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, eccetera, a loro manca la cultura. L'Olivetti, oltre alla grande tecnologia, ha fatto un lavoro di grande cultura e questa mostra è l'apoteosi del lavoro dell'Olivetti nel campo tecnologico e nel campo culturale. Questa è la prima tappa della mostra, anzi prima di questa viene la tappa dedicata agli 4 artisti. Anche lì una cosa molto importante sul piano culturale, perché 3 dei 4 artisti erano i rappresentanti di una corrente, che non so quanti di voi frequentino l'arte contemporanea, era quella detta dell'arte povera. All'epoca era una corrente seguita pochissimo e l'Olivetti è stata molto brava a scegliere questi 4 artisti. La mostra è stata fatta all'interno del contenitore che poi sarebbe diventato la mostra Formes et Recherche. Io ho partecipato a questa mostra in qualità di grafico. L'architettura era di Gaia Aulenti e tutta la grafica della mostra all'interno dei vari box è stata a cura mia. Questo è il box della Valentine. Il problema era di dare un'immagine di questa macchina per un pubblico molto giovane, un po' hippie. E infatti, come potete vedere, la grafica, credo che questo grande poster riprodotto fosse di Edelman, all'epoca un grafico inglese molto, molto famoso, aveva fatto soprattutto dei disegni bellissimi per i Beatles, per le copertine dei libri dei Beatles. E quindi qui c'è proprio l'idea di una società di giovani che utilizzavano questa macchina. La macchina era disegnata da Sozzas ed era destinata proprio prevalentemente a un target di giovani. E addirittura in questo box, oltre alla grafica che potete vedere, poi partire, c'era addirittura una colonna sonora con varie musiche che erano i Beatles, i Donovan, i cantanti che andavano in quegli anni. C'era addirittura una novità per il mondo musicale delle musiche di Ravi Shankar, che era arrivato nella cultura europea. Questo box rappresenta l'attività culturale dell'Olivetti e qui ci sono la grande farfalla che era il poster della mostra dei 4 artisti, poi ci sono delle fotografie che sono state fatte durante la mostra dei 4 artisti, le installazioni. Ma era il Presidente della Repubblica Italiana. E poi penso a un'altra... Questa mostra questa mostra ha fatto diverse tappe. La prima è stata al Musée des Arts Décoratifs a Parigi, poi è andata a Barcellona, poi a Madrid. Questa è la fotografia che documenta l'installazione a Madrid in un posto meraviglioso che è il Palacio de Cristal, nel Parque del Buen Retiro, un luogo straordinario dove la mostra sembrava veramente una cosa metafisica. E in questi 4 box sono rappresentati i poster più belli che sono stati fatti dall'Olivetti. Per l'Olivetti hanno lavorato grafici importantissimi tipo Melton Glaser, Alan Fletcher, pittori, e questi documentano appunto l'attività della grafica intesa come poster. Qui si può vedere l'allestimento, erano tanti volumi, la mostra sembrava come una grande città, ed era quest'idea della Gaia Olenzi di creare tanti box, e ogni box rappresentava un fatto culturale o tecnologico. Questa è una geniale invenzione di Ettore Sozzas. In questa macchina che noi chiamavamo la torta vengono proiettati tutti i video che riguardavano l'attività dell'Olivetti, ed è incredibile come Sozzas sia riuscito a creare un oggetto bellissimo per una funzione poi pratica. L'Olivetti ogni anno faceva delle strenne per le persone più importanti a cui mandava. Questo era un meraviglioso calendario fatto da Alan Fletcher, che era un grafico inglese, e stampato tutto in serigrafia, una cosa preziosissima. Questa immagine rappresenta la bellezza del luogo, come potete vedere, si sposa perfettamente con l'idea dell'Olivetti, con questa architettura che pur essendo una cosa antica è modernissima. Questo è il cosiddetto box dei caratteri. L'idea era di rappresentare tutti i caratteri del mondo. L'Olivetti naturalmente produceva macchine e ogni macchina, a seconda del paese, doveva avere i caratteri del paese. E qui ci sono rappresentati un po' tutti i caratteri del mondo, appesi come un ambiente anche direi abbastanza metafisico. E questo è ancora il box dei caratteri, era il box che piaceva più di tutti. Infatti è stato anche molto fotografato, poi nel catalogo troverete anche delle fotografie, ce n'è una molto bella di Ugo Mulas dove all'interno del box c'è Italo Calvino. Questa fotografia documenta la collaborazione all'interno della mostra. I responsabili per l'allestimento eravamo la Gaia Olenzi e io, però anche alcuni architetti che collaboravano con Olivetti hanno partecipato. In questo caso questo ambiente era stato progettato da Sozzas. Questa è un'altra immagine molto scenografica dell'ambiente di Sozzas con l'ambiente del Palazzo dei Cristalli. Questa è ancora la torta di Sozzas con tutta la gente. Era molto divertente guardare dei filmati all'interno di questa cosa. Questo è un altro particolare del box dei caratteri. Questo è ancora il box della Valentine, come vedete è proprio destinato a un pubblico molto giovane. Qui siamo invece a Londra. La mostra al Musée des Arts Décoratifs era in un contenitore all'interno del quale poi sono stati messi tutti i vari box. A Barcellona più o meno anche, a Madrid nel Palazzo del Cristallo, a Londra, a Edimburgo è stato costruito una cosa simile a questo pallone, però in legno, perché la mostra è stata fatta in un enorme spazio commerciale e quindi per isolarla dal contesto esterno è stato costruito questo ambiente. A Londra è stata fatta più o meno la stessa cosa in una piazza davanti alla stazione, però il pallone era gonfiato, quindi tutta la mostra era all'interno di questo enorme pallone che era gonfiato poi ad aria. Questo è il manifesto che rappresentava la mostra, disegnato da Ettore Sozzas. Direi che ho detto tutto quello che si poteva dire.
I think I've said everything I need to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's conclude with our last speaker, Marco Sammicheli, Curator and professor at the School of Design at the Politecnico di Milano, he wrote monographs on architects like Zaha Hadid, Mario Bellini, and essays on catalogs for many institutions and museums. After serving as the main editor of the magazine Zero, he worked as design editor for Abitare from 2014 to 2017. He has curated several projects for many different institutions, including the Triennale of Milan, where last year he curated the exhibition Mario Bellini, Italian Beauty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The buffet is already whispering, so don't worry, I'll be quite fast. But let me thank you once again, the NIU, for inviting me, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to sit next to Giorgio Colombo and Perry King, next to Giovanni Maggio and Beniamino De Liguori Carino, because as a researcher, Olivetti means a lot to me, as an Italian as well. My communication will be very simple, and as Caterina said at the beginning, as a student, I want to communicate this to students. And I want to underline once again that the people that they are sitting, except me and Caterina, in front of you, are not veterans, are ambassadors. There's no nostalgia in all this. There's the strength of keeping a message alive and strong for different and new generations. That's very important. So let me repeat it once again, they are not veterans. My first encounter with the Olivetti was my mom typewriter. And I share this particular episode just because when this research ends in 1979, I was born. So for me, Olivetti was something that happened many years after this epic story we are looking at. I'm always scared when I talk to my students to share the Olivetti story as something that it doesn't exist anymore. But I really think that that exception can still be looked at as a possible rule, not probably for design, not probably for production, not probably for industry, but for sure for the ethics. And ethics and politics move the world. And the grammar, the aesthetic grammar, is summed up, in my opinion, in this picture. There's two men that they come from different world. The young looking down is Roberto Olivetti, and the man which is standing next to him is Mario Chu, a mathematician with Chinese-American roots. And honestly, when I look at this picture, I see me and my brother. My brother attend Liceo Scientifico and me Liceo Classico, so like a classical high school and a scientific high school. In this very personal and probably simple image, you see the incredible combination of Olivetti verb. This photo tells a lot about when you said that the idiom of Olivetti was basically based on the idea of community, of people staying together. And these people that they were able to stay together were truly men with divine flame. In this photo you can see on this side Ettore Sozzas, Mr. Zorzi, Mario Bellini, and then on the other side, George Souden, Masanori Umeda, Jacqueline, Maki Cassia, like people too, that they were there working and developing an idea which was not only related to technology, but was related to the idea of human being. I'm here to talk about the contribution of Mario Bellini, because I wrote articles in catalogs on him, and last year for Triennale di Milano, with Dejan Sujic, which is the director of London Design Museum. I curated a show called Mario Bellini Italian Beauty. And before Mario Bellini designed what already Beniamino De Liguori introduced us, the P11 with the technical engineers of Olivetti, the idea of computer, the Ellyn 9003, was a room. Olivetti has always been a company able to anticipate behaviors, which is something absolutely important when you talk about design and when you talk about technologies. Anticipating behaviors meant that computer needed to be not anymore a room or a space, but needed to be a daily tool for us, a desktop computer. And Ettore Sozzas designed the Ellyn 9003, and before inviting Mario Bellini to develop this project, they did a trial with Marco Zanuso, but they didn't really succeed because his idea was to develop like a sort of like standing and lying down machine. This is the P101, mainly was a machine able to develop 4 calculation lines at the same time. It's something that now can make us laughing, but at that time in 1965 was extremely revolutionary. These are different points of view. Bellini designed the cage, but all the technology inside was developed by Perotto and another group of engineers. During the exhibition in Triennale, we connect the P101 and we did a performance with simply, I don't know how to translate it in English, with a piano di ammortamento di un mutuo, with something like a very basic stuff you can do it with your account manager in a bank. But but with the P101, it was extremely fascinating to see how it was working there. And the room was packed and people were there. But the idiom or the aesthetic of Olivetti for Mario Bellini was an opportunity to embrace different visions. For example, the side of the P101 is a shark. And these lines over here to make the hair like not warming too much the engine, like starting from this idea of like a breathing, wild and strong animal. Either the communication, I try to pick up some cherries that they can be in somehow very contemporary, understood by you as a young generation. The do-it-yourself computer, that could be a statement for a maker. The idea of like bring your computer on your own desk. It's my tool. It's something I can live. I mean, we live with these devices nowadays, and we look at the world with this. The potential of merging art and contemporary expression into something which could connect different worlds in a multidisciplinary way that was at that time very unusual. This is the first presentation of P101 in New York, BEFA, which was a fair, and that was how this computer was received. I mean, it's a long chapter to talk about the relationship between Olivetti and United States. It's a story full of memorable moments, and it's a story full of blurred moments. But this was the press in the moment that the P101 arrived in the market, landed into the market. This is a picture of what Beniamino told us few minutes ago about the agency, the spatial agency and ACA using the P101 to control the Apollo 13 launch. And this is an example of graphic that truly reminds us what Steve Jobs ages later did for Apple. But because I don't want to feel like a groupie, because I'm young, or like giovanile, I would say, not very young anymore. But Steve Jobs tried 3 times to invite Mario Bellini to be part of Apple, and for 3 times Mario Bellini said no, because his relationship with Olivetti was strong and satisfying. But the connection between Steve Jobs and Mario Bellini are different episodes, but this one is quite relevant. I mean, this is one of the slides that Bellini uses in different lectures around the world to talk about Divisuma 28, which was a calculator where the keyboard was covered by a rubber layer. And for Steve Jobs and for the technique historian, this is the grandfather of touch screen. The idea of like touching as a human body, a keyboard, and feeling a personal relationship with the tool was absolutely something relevant and revolutionary for this calculator. Let me show you a photo of Giorgio Colombo, of this calculator and of this idea of having a body relationship with the tool. I mean, nowadays when we are offline, when the battery goes down, we are completely lost. And we touch everything. I mean, this idea of touching and living with the tool for our working day was absolutely extraordinary. Mario Bellini brought the story and the identity and the imaginary of Antonello da Messina, a Renaissance artist, into the brilliant and sparkling technological world of Olivetti. Doesn't need captions, this photo. And this photo is by Hugo Mulas. That's like nothing was left without care. All the details, all the pictures, the graphic, the entire world was absolutely relevant for different, for customers, for employees. And this idea of this extraordinary and romantic approach of Natale Cappellaro was a virus in Olivetti company. I heard so many stories, famous or not, of people that were absolutely attached to the company as a second family. These are pictures, not very famous, but of the offices of Olivetti in Milano. You can see Mario Bellini and other collaborators working together and developing. Bellini developed over 200 machines and tools and calculators for Olivetti's company. Here is him phoning, and on his back, on the wall, you can see few pictures of that they are exhibited as well in the exhibition next door. The here is with Marisa Belisario, even to show the idea that, you know, a typewriter could be your handbag. And him once again at work. I'm running out of time. I just want to tell you that absolutely you can't program beauty. But this idea, especially it's for us, I have an idea. I would love to jump on Beniamino's shoulders, on the legacy of Olivetti Foundation, and look into the future with the great experience of this company. For two reasons. Because I think that beauty and future are two concepts that they need to be connected. And second, because I'm a proud Italian European, and I think that this incredible story tells a lot about our roots. Thanks a lot.
So it's thank you. It's time to conclude. Thank you very much for having shared with us your stories, experiences, and researches about tracing a real and complete Olivetti story through design, advertising, people, social responsibility towards workers and the local territory, and exhibitions. I think that we have to conclude, and I really want to enjoy this exhibition, which has been set on the ground floor and on the first floor. So thank you very much for coming, and enjoy the exhibition.